this is how many people view Muslims. So they think, oh, look, you know, that's the essential reason why you separate yourself from women. Okay, and I've heard this so many times, and they say, well, look, as for us, you know, we can control ourselves. So what's the harm? If I was to sit next to a woman, or if I was to shake her hand, or if I was to be alone with her in a room, or if I was to hug her in an innocent way, or if I was to, you know, kiss her on the cheek, well, there's no harm in that. I don't get all excited if I was to, you know, if I was to do that. But we say, look, in Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has laid down certain prohibitions. Certain things He prohibits because of the evil for what they are, and other things He prohibits because it leads on to other things. The brother asked the difference between the term mawadda and mahabba. Okay, as you know, Arabic language is a very, very rich language. So in many cases we have many words that refer to similar concept. With regards to love, the word love in Arabic, there are about 10 to 15 words. Okay, that reflect the meaning of love. Okay. Some of them convey the same meaning, but they have different ways of doing it. Okay? So for example, mahabba in essence doesn't actually mean love. Mahabba, it comes from the word hab. And hab we use to refer to a seed. Okay, a seed. And a seed is the innermost part of a fruit. Okay? And love, likewise, it's something which it lies within the innermost part of a person, i.e. his heart. They also say that hab has a meaning of whiteness, something which is very clear and white and pure. Okay, so, you know, the hibab is a description given to someone who has very, very brilliant, shining white teeth. Yeah? So they say, love, likewise, love is something which is very brilliant and white in that way. It's very pure. Because when you love someone, your relationship with them is based upon sincerity, okay, and it's a relationship based on purity. Mawadda, on the other hand, or wood, in essence it means love. In essence, it means love. Okay, whereas mahabba has a slightly different connotation. Okay, in essence, but then it was used later on to refer to love, and you have different degrees as well. As you know, there's actually an article that I wrote on. It's called. What it's called now. Al-Ishq. Ishq. Okay, ISHQ. It's on Islam 21C on the website. There I speak about one type of degree of love, which is any very, very high form of love, a passionate love, which is called ishq. But in that article I mentioned some other forms, other degrees as well. So maybe you could refer to that to get a better understanding of the different types. That's fine. Is it fard to get married? Is it an obligation to get married if you're not falling into sin? Are you going to get punished if you're not getting married in this case? The exact ruling of marriage will differ from person to person. Generally speaking, we say marriage is recommended. It's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. For some people, it becomes more than a sunnah. Who does it become? Who is it? You know, more of a sunnah to? It applies to those who fear that they will fall into zina. So if they fear that they would fall into sin and fall into haram because they're not married, then it becomes more than a sunnah, it becomes an obligation. For other people, it might be even disliked to get married. And in some cases, even haram to get married. For example, those people, some scholars said that if a person, for example, has no real desires and no type of attraction, okay, for the opposite gender, okay, and for any gender, okay, then that person, okay, for them to get married, we don't say is really recommended, especially, okay, in essence, okay, if that person fears that they might not be able to fulfill the rights of their spouse. Because in many cases, fulfilling the rights of your spouse is also dependent upon your needs as well. Okay, so if you don't feel that you have those needs, you might fall short in fulfilling the needs of your spouse. So in that situation, it might become disliked for you to get married. And if you know you're going to be very oppressive to your spouse, okay, and you won't take care of her financially, and you know, you might abuse her, for example, in that case it becomes haram for you to marry. So the actual rulings of marriage depend from person to person, but we say in essence the original ruling is that it is recommended. There was an opinion of some of the scholars that it's an obligation, but that's not the opinion of the majority of the scholars. Which hadith states that the Prophet ﷺ divorced his wives, and it wasn't a complete divorce, a proper divorce, but if you look in the tafsir of Surah At-Talaq, go to Surah At-Talaq, go to Ibn Kathir, and you find the whole story mentioned there. Do you think that it is Islamically acceptable for males and females to be sitting in the same room whilst talking about love? Would you do this in front of the Prophet if he were alive today? Thank you for your effort. La haya fi din, we say. When it comes to matters of the religion, okay, there is no haya. When it comes to matters of the religion, there should be no haya. Okay? And so if you need to be educated about something, okay, if you need to be educated about something in the religion, it's important that you ask about it and that someone tells you about it. Okay? Now, I don't see any problem whatsoever talking about this topic in this type of gathering and setting, because at the end of the day, it's not as if you are facing one another. Okay? It's not as if you're facing one another and you're talking about it to one another. I'm speaking to you about it. I'm speaking to you about it. And the Prophet ﷺ used to sit in front of gatherings where there were women and respond to their questions. Okay? About the, personal issues. Okay, and that's why the brother said, if you feel uncomfortable asking a particular question, you can write it down. Okay, you won't be put, to stand in front and ask your question to everyone for you to look at. Does marriage complete half of a woman's deen also? Of course, absolutely. This hadith is applicable to both. If there is someone you want to marry, are you allowed to wait for that opportunity? At the same time, rejecting good marriage proposals. I think, okay, you're asking if there's someone you want to marry, are you allowed to wait for that opportunity? Meaning you want to delay the marriage to wait for an appropriate time maybe to approach them. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. And at the same time, rejecting good marriage proposals, yeah, at the end of the day, you do what is best for your religion. You do what is best for your religion, even if it means delaying, looking into other people or rejecting other proposals. But also be realistic as well. Be realistic in your search for a spouse. Okay, there's a nice saying that if you want to get married to an Aisha, you have to be a Muhammad, isn't it? And if you want to get married to the likes of Muhammad, then be someone like Aisha radiallahu anha. Okay, so be realistic. Be realistic. That doesn't mean it's wrong to look to marry someone who is better than you. That's fine, you can do that. Okay? But also, take into consideration your circumstances. I mean, there was one incident where a woman came up to the Prophet ﷺ and she proposed to the Prophet ﷺ directly. And Anas radiallahu anhu was there with his daughter, and the daughter of Anas said to her, look at this woman, she has no shame. This woman has no shame. She's going and directly asking the Prophet ﷺ. What did Anas say? This is reported in Bukhari, by the way. Anas said, no, she is better than you. She's better than you. She saw that the Prophet was good for her and potential husband for her, so she approached him. Okay? Now, obviously, please understand the context of this. I don't want all of the sisters running to the brothers now. But you know, obviously, if there are avenues and ways that where you can approach in a suitable manner, obviously use that avenue first. Okay, and that's why, generally speaking, this applies to both brothers and sisters. It's best maybe not to approach directly, okay, and get someone else to approach on your behalf, because maybe that person is not looking for marriage at that time. Okay, and so you don't want to expose yourself, and you don't want to potentially fall into fitna as a result of that. Okay, so you know, for example, if you know the sister's wali, approach her wali. If you don't know her wali details, then the details of her wali, then try and find out somehow. Get your own sister to help you if you have a sister. If not, another sister that you might know. Okay, but again, be realistic, because you are at university, and in most cases, you're probably not in the position to get married. Some of you might be able to get married, and I know many people got married when they were at university. Okay, but also, please remember to involve your families. Very, very important. Brothers and sisters, if you want to get married now, make sure your families are aware of that. Your parents in particular. Your parents in particular. Why? Because the last thing you want to do, okay, is, you know, build yourself up, you know, psych yourself up that I'm going to get married. You find the suitable person, and you know, you even start to develop feelings for that person, and then you go to your parents and then you say, I want to get married. They're like, no. So what's going to happen? It's going to be very difficult for you. Very, very difficult for you. Whereas if you had involved them in the process from right at the beginning, because in many cases it takes a long time for your parents to become accustomed to the idea of you getting married. Okay? It takes a while. So it's best to start early. Okay? It's best to start early. Get the idea of marriage in your minds. Now get your, you know, especially for sisters, wallahi sisters, it's become a serious problem nowadays that many sisters look to get married at a very, very late age. Part of the problem is their fathers, because their fathers expect them to graduate, then after they graduate they work for a few years, and then the process starts to begin, and by then they're 28, 29, 30. And brothers are getting younger when it comes to marriage. Okay? You know, brothers come to me and they say, oh, you know, help me get married. They're like 20, 21, 22, 23. I even had a 16-year-old the other day come up to me. Okay? So, you know, really try and encourage your parents to start, you know, looking for you at this age. And it's better that you get married when you're young. Wallahi, it's better that you get married when you're young. Don't delay. Don't delay for work, and for brothers as well. Don't delay because of work and, oh, I don't have enough money. No. Believe me, if you have the correct attitude and the correct intention, Allah will find a way out for you. Rasulullah ﷺ said, there are free people. There are free people that Allah has made it a right upon Himself that He helps. There are free people that Allah has made it a right upon Himself that He helps. Out of these free people was someone, الناكح الذي يريد العفاف, a person who wants to get married and wants to protect his chastity. Allah has made it a right upon Himself, but you need to have that attitude, you need to have that conviction, and you need to have that trust in Allah. But many of us don't have that. We despair right at the beginning of the whole process. We think, oh, I'm too young, I'm still at uni, I don't have enough money. The Sahaba, they said, actually, when it comes to marriage, and when it comes to this problem of money and marriage, they said, as Abu Bakr radiallahu anh said, seek richness through marriage. Seek your richness and your wealth through marriage, because it's by marriage two people come together, their provisions come together as well. And so Allah puts barakah in their provisions, and they end up having more provisions. And you can speak of countless examples of people you might know, I personally know, that after they got married, okay, they, you know, they were, yani, subhanAllah, the doors of provisions opened up for them in an amazing way. Okay, so have that reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. We'll take a question from the brothers if there's a question. Are these from the brothers as well?
I have a question quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. So it might be off topic because it's not a marriage question.
Okay.
But in uni and say in the workplace, sometimes you might have to work in a group whereby you might have both genders within the group. Now, what advice would you give to ensure that, say, the practicing person is actually setting the boundaries?
Yeah.
So the other party knows that, you know, there's certain limitations,
yeah,
but they're not offended, or, you know, they can still work productively.
If you work in an environment where there are men and women working together, the key principle you must remember is the ayah in the Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ, that fear Allah as much as you can. Fear Allah as much as you can. That should be a golden principle, for yourself. And obviously keep relations to a necessity where you feel that you need to communicate with the opposite gender, then do so, but I said really based upon necessity, based upon your needs at work. But in terms of setting the parameters and the guidelines of how people should interact with you, at the end of the day, you can't always influence the way people interact with you. People have their own ways of going about interacting with people. But you can advise them. If it's too much, like some people, they're sometimes too friendly. Okay? There are ways that you can do it in a diplomatic way. Okay? I remember when I was young at school, okay, I faced this dilemma as well. But I took the wrong approach. Maybe not wrong approach, but it was very, very harsh. So, so there'll be some girls that will try to speak to me, and I said, sorry, it's haram for me to free mix in my religion. Okay? But subhanallah, they really respected me for that. Okay? Even though for many people that it's very strange, they might not understand it. Okay? And I suppose it requires some sort of courage to do that. But maybe that's a type of approach you want to take. Not say it so directly like that. So, for example, if they invite you to go around to watch the movies after work or to go to a restaurant or what have you, just say, you don't have to say exactly why, but you can just say, look, I prefer not to go. This really environment is not suitable for me as a Muslim. As Muslims, we have certain principles about gender relations and what have you. Maybe you can express it in that way so that people know where to stand, inshallah. Okay. When the time does come, how does a woman search for a spouse, especially without a brother and family to support? If you don't really have a family or a brother to support, it is very difficult. We appreciate that. It's also very difficult for brothers as well. You can ask your friends to help you as well. Ask your friends to help. Always, whenever you see an opportunity with a sister that ask her to search for you as well. There are other options as well. Generally, these websites, matrimonial websites, I generally tell people to be very careful of them because a lot of them are, they don't have enough, correct guidelines of using them. There are some which are good and have been, recommended and endorsed by some scholars and, some institutions like Pure Matrimony. Okay, that seems to be a good halal alternative to these other websites, Pure Matrimony. So that's something maybe you can look into, inshallah. Maybe go to like imams, local imams of your masajid, people that might be aware of, other, brothers that are looking as well, etc. And obviously the key thing, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to assist you and ask you, inshallah. Is it true that a Sahabi was told to marry by a prophet to gain riches, and on his fourth, his wealth multiplied? I can't think of a particular incident like that. Okay. Can you shake the hand of the opposite sex in work situations such as in an interview or on graduation day? What happens if a man or woman pulls his or her hand to shake at an interview? What should one do or say without sounding rude or losing your potential job? There are two aspects to this question. The first is the actual ruling, and the ruling, as you should know, it's that it's not allowed under any circumstances, generally speaking, to shake the hand of the opposite gender. The Prophet ﷺ, he said that that verily I do not shake hands with the opposite gender. I do not shake hands with the opposite gender. And Allah says in the Quran, take from whatever the Prophet ﷺ has given to you. So he has told us this ruling, then we adhere to it. It is not reported once that the Prophet ﷺ shake hands with the opposite gender. Okay? Even at the time of the bay'ah, where the pledge of allegiance was given to the Prophet ﷺ, the correct understanding is that he never shook hands with any woman. Okay, so that's the ruling. And we mentioned the hadith, for one of you to be pierced in your head with a needle made of iron is better for him than to touch someone who is not halal for him. And we said this is merely touching, so that includes handshakes. Obviously, if someone accidentally touches your hand, like if you're at the shop, for example, and someone at the cashier is opposite gender and they touch your hand by accident, that's overlooked. But to intentionally go and touch someone's skin like that, then that is not permissible. Secondly, in terms of work situations and interviews, yeah, we have to think about it from a practical perspective. How can we work around this? There are a number of ways. Okay, firstly, maybe you want to inform those who will interview you in advance. Send them a polite email, such that, because maybe they could become offended if it was to happen right at that situation. Okay, and make it clear as well that this is not because of if it's a brother, for example, going to the interview, and the person who's going to interview him is a woman, he should make it clear that he's not allowed to shake her hand, not because that she's a woman. Okay, because many people misunderstand this and they think, oh, because I'm a woman, you can't shake my hand. No, it's the other way around as well. A woman can't shake the hand of a man. Do you see this point? Yeah. So it's not just because of a woman; it's because of it's both way around. It's seen in exactly the same light. So we don't say in Islam it's not allowed to shake hands with women. Don't say it like that, because then that belittles women. Just say in Islam, opposite genders are not allowed to come in physical contact with one another. This is an aspect of my religion which I would appreciate if you could, accept and, overlook, maybe in the interview. And there are different ways you can word it, but try and be polite about it. And then, if you inform them in advance like that, they'll be happy with them, hopefully. Okay? Likewise, in graduation, you might want to inform them of that as well. I mean, some people have other tricks as well, like they always have a sweet in their pocket. Okay, so whenever someone extends their hand, they give them a sweet instead of shaking their hands. Okay, some put gloves on their hands, for example. But these things are not necessary. If a person is more upfront with their religion, that is better, and that's more of an opportunity for da'wah as well. Okay. Okay. What advice would you give to the brothers and sisters who are free mixing and interacting with the opposite gender? Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to your chastity, with regards to protecting your deen and your honor. Okay? Wallahi, brothers and sisters, this life will come and go past very, very quickly. Come and go by very, very quickly. And a day will come we will regret many of the sins that we did in this life. And we would realize it was not worth it. It was not worth it. And I have found really one of the best ways of avoiding sin and the best ways of avoiding falling into haram is to realize how quick and short this life is. And how quickly you will be standing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He will account you for your deeds. And if you look at all of the scenes that Allah depicts in the Quran about the Day of Judgment, subhanAllah, it's all about regret. Ya laytani, woe to me. Why did I do this? Why did I take that person as a friend? Why did I take that person as a friend when he led me astray? How much I have fallen short in fulfilling the commands of Allah. Read the Quran, brothers and sisters. See the ill effects of your sins. Wallahi, you would want to flee from those sins. The Prophet ﷺ said, when a believer commits a sin, he feels as though a mountain is about to fall upon him. A mountain is about to fall upon him. But when the evildoer, he commits a sin, how does he see it? He sees it as though it's a fly just in front of him. So don't treat these matters lightly, brothers and sisters. Wallahi, these years at your university, they will shape your future. They will shape your future. These are very, very important years. Your personality, your Islamic identity and personality will be shaped in these years. If you spend these years in sin and transgressing and disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it will affect you for the rest of your life. Wallahi, it will affect you for the rest of your life. That's why Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah, he said, when it comes to balancing between fear and hope, he said for the youth it's more important that they concentrate more on fearing Allah rather than having hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His mercy. Because they are more accustomed to committing sin, they are exposed and they fall into sin very easily. So you should focus on fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam. How would you know that a brother is correct and what should he have? generally speaking, when it comes to this issue of looking for a potential spouse, you must always remember that you will never know your potential spouse with the amount of detail that you would like to know that person. Okay, because as you know, within Islam, you're not allowed to have relationship outside of marriage. So how will you come to know this person? This is a common question many people ask, especially many non-Muslims, and this is something that they fail to realize or understand. And how can you live a life with someone who you've, for the rest of your life, and you've only spent maybe 2 or 3 meetings with them? Number one, we say it's very possible, because look at the Muslim Ummah, look at the size of the Muslim Ummah. Okay, most marriages that have taken place within Muslim communities, they didn't have a relationship prior to their marriage, yet they live in love and in harmony and peace with themselves. Okay, so it's important to realize that you might not never know your potential spouse with the amount of detail that you would like to know them with, okay, prior to the marriage. And therefore that requires you to have great trust in Allah. You need to have that great trust in Allah. Don't expect for you to be 100% content with your potential spouse and then you agree to the marriage. And I've seen many cases where brothers, there's one brother, he looked into 17 sisters. Yeah, that's not strange. That's actually very common these days. Okay, and right at the end, he realized what his mistake was. He was expecting to see a sister after 1 or 2 meetings and say, that's it, she's the perfect one. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen like that, unless you're very fortunate. Okay, but most likely it's not going to happen like that. Therefore, you need to look at the most important features to you, that are important to you, and leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so you have to look to yourself. Obviously, as a Muslim who's inshallah practicing, the most important thing is deen, isn't it? Religion. Okay, that if you see that the person, and here it's very important that we distinguish between religion, your deen, and akhlaq and manners. They are not always synonymous. They are not always synonymous. That's why in the hadith, listen very carefully, the hadith mentions, if someone comes to you, okay, and you're pleased with their deen and their khuluq, you're pleased with their deen and their akhlaq, then marry that person, or marry your daughter off to that person. If you don't, there will be fitna and fasad upon the earth. Okay, fasadun arid, yani widespread corruption. But look at the hadith says, if someone comes to you and he is good in his deen and akhlaq and manners. Many people go for deen straight away, but they ignore what? Akhlaq. So a person could have a lot of knowledge. He might be able to pray a lot. He can fast a lot. Maybe he gives da'wah. Maybe he gives talks. Maybe he's active in the ISOP. Maybe he's XYZ. And the same for sisters as well. But their akhlaq is atrocious. They have no sabr. They might lie. They might commit haram. They might backbite. They might have traits that you do not like. They might get angry very, very quickly, etc. Okay? So, really, it's a combination of two. And in many cases, the most important thing is akhlaq. So, for example, if you have a situation where you have someone who's very good in deen, but their akhlaq is not so good, they're very knowledgeable, etc., but their akhlaq is not so good, and you have another person whose akhlaq is great, but their religion, their knowledge of their religion, etc., is not that great. Personally, I think a person should go with the second person. Okay, a person should go with the second. And I've seen, subhanAllah, from experience, the people that are most happy in their marriage are those who looked for akhlaq. Those who look for akhlaq. They're the people that they generally have a happier marriage. There was one case, I remember a sister, she married a brother, and for a long time she felt like saying no. In fact, she said no a few times to the brother, because he wasn't really, what we would say, that practicing. He didn't go to talks, and he prayed, he had a beard, he prayed, he fasted, did the very, very basics, but his akhlaq was, mashallah, impeccable. Okay, and this sister was more knowledgeable than him as well, in the deen and what have you. But subhanAllah, now she's, very, very happy in her marriage. Very, very happy in her marriage. Why? Because of his akhlaq. Because of the akhlaq. Okay. If you meet someone who your parents don't approve of, what advice would you offer? The first thing, remember, brothers and sisters, that in order for a marriage to be valid in Islam, you need the permission of your guardian. Okay, for the sisters, they need the permission of their guardians, their wali. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La nikah illa bi wali." There can be no marriage without the permission of the guardian. Now, for some people, that might seem very oppressive. Why should a grown woman need the permission of her wali? But you have to remember, what is the purpose of the wali? What is the purpose of your father? Your father is there to protect you and to protect your interests. He is older, he is wiser. But also, not just that, it's not just restricted to that. As one scholar recently said, that it's not just about the issue of protection, it's about keeping the family together. Because if you bypass your parents when it comes to marriage, you might live a happily married life, but you'll be completely cut off from your parents. Okay? So sisters, and be very, very careful. Very, very careful. Okay? You need the permission of your parents. And a couple of issues, okay? Maybe we'll need to wrap up with that, but this is, I believe, very, very important, okay? Sometimes your parents might refuse a proposal based upon an un-Islamic reason, or what might appear to be un-Islamic. For example, what? Race, nationality, color, etc. Okay, so you come with a proposal from a person from a different ethnic background, and they'll say, look, I don't want you to get married to that person. Okay? Is that haram? Is it haram to refuse someone based upon their race or gender or background or nationality? From the onset, it might seem like this is racism. It's haram, because Allah, at the end of the day, He says, we created you in many different colors and tribes, etc. And the most closest of you are those who have taqwa. The Prophet said, an Arab has no virtue of a non-Arab. Black doesn't have no virtue of a white, vice versa, etc. But think carefully. Perhaps your father sees that, for example, there is tension between two cultures. For example, you could be Pakistani and the brother might be from Bangladesh, for example. Okay, it's the classic example. Yeah. And so what happens as a result of that? Okay, as you know, just for those who are unaware, these two countries went to war with one another. Yeah? And generally there is animosity between both of them, between both countries. Okay, especially in the older generation. Yeah? Maybe not in our generation. And so what happens, the father, he says, no, I don't want you to get married to that person, not because of he's Pakistani or he's Bengali, but because you're going to move into his family, into a family where they will not understand your language, you will not understand their language, and they might mistreat you, meaning your mother-in-law might mistreat you. Okay? Because of this issue. And so for the sake of your future, I feel though it's not best for you to marry this person. It might harm you. So after all, that we can't say that's haram. But unfortunately what happens is, especially when you're very young and you really want to get married, what happens is you're quick to to try and dismiss your father as being the wali. So he's saying he's giving un-Islamic reasons. There was one case I remember when one sister said, I need to change my wali. I said, why? Because he's a kafir. I said, whoa. Why is he a kafir? Because he doesn't pray. Okay, he doesn't pray. And there is an opinion amongst the fuqaha that if a person doesn't pray, he's not kafir. If a person doesn't pray, he's a kafir. So I said, okay, before you were looking to get married, what was your father? Was he a Muslim or kafir? Okay, and that's when, but no, it's clear. Many cases, don't use Islam to justify your hawa, your desires. Okay, even though technically it might be correct, but don't use a religion to justify your whims and your desires. And sometimes, as they say, love blinds, isn't it? Okay, it can blind you from doing what is correct. Okay, so be wary of that, inshallah. So the advice I would give is that, be patient. Okay, there are many other fish in the sea, as they say. Okay, especially if you're Bengali. Okay. So have sabr, inshallah. وَمَا يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever has taqwa of Allah, Allah will find a way for him. Okay, Allah will find a way for him, inshallah. And also one more point with regards to the wali. Changing the wali, okay, is not a matter of fatwa. It's not a matter of fatwa. It's a matter of qada. It's a matter of qada. Memorize this principle. Changing the wali is not a matter of fatwa. What does it mean for it to be a matter of fatwa? A matter of fatwa would be you go to islamqna.com and you see questions related to changing the wali and say, see, look, when your wali is being obstructive and he's obstructing you from getting married, you can change the wali. No. It's a matter of qada, meaning it has to be decided in a court of law or in an equivalent situation. So you go to Sharia council, or you go to an imam or a qadi, a judge, a scholar who has the qualifications of being a scholar and a judge. He sits you down with your father and he discusses in front of both of you why, he is not marrying off his daughter. Then after all of that, and after looking at his excuses, if he feels as though the father is not suitable to be a wali, he can pass on the wali to somebody else. Okay, and there is a list of a particular order that it goes through. First to the grandfather, if you have a paternal grandfather. If not, to your sons, if you were previously married. Then to your brothers, etc. Okay. I think we will. There are many other questions. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to answer them, so I apologize for that.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Inshallah, I'll be answering the remaining questions from the session we had at QMW. So here a question reads, could you give some practical advice on how to get about approaching marriage, specifically who to speak to, and is it okay to speak to the brother of the sister without the father knowing, and meeting the sister with her brother without the father knowing? Remember, as I mentioned during the lecture, that as students at university, you really have to be very realistic and be careful not to fall into sin or error. The first point about being realistic, since you're at university, in many cases, most of you, maybe if not the majority, are not really in the position to get married at university due to your studies and due to the fact that you won't really have the ability to provide for a spouse, most of you, and also for the sisters, their sisters' parents are probably not willing to get their daughters married off during their studies. So therefore, you really have to seriously take that into consideration and be practical about it. The last thing you want to do is look for someone without your parents even knowing that you're looking to get married, and then because the fact that you're actively looking, you might feel attached to a brother or a sister, and as a result of that, and then your parents find out and they say no, it can lead to a lot of heartache and problems. So in this situation where a brother is keen to marry a sister, and he wants to find out more about her, and so he decides to have a meeting with her brother, with her mahram, without the father knowing, then this I would strongly advise against it. The reason being is because what is the point in meeting this sister without her father knowing, if the father's gonna say no in the first place, or not going to, he's not going to want for her to get married at that particular time? The best thing to do is for you to go and speak to her father, and if he is okay with you and it's okay for her to get married to you, then that's fine. Then after that you can meet with her, in a suitable environment, with her parents being aware of that. But otherwise, without her father knowing, then this is wrong. It shouldn't be done, and it could lead to fitna, and it could lead to many problems. So really, stay far away from that. Another question here: can a man get married in secret if he knows his parents will say no? Well, firstly, for a man to get married, technically speaking, it's not required that he has the permission of his father. That is to say that the brother, he doesn't have a wali. The sister is meant to have a wali, but not the brother. Having said that, though, this is strongly, we would advise against it. The reason being, because as I mentioned in the lesson, that remember, when two people get married, it's not just two individuals that are getting to know one another and live with one another, etc. In reality, it's two families coming together as well. So to get married in secret, this is obviously going to create a lot of controversy in your family, and it's most likely it will create many problems, and it's highly unlikely to even occur, really, especially if the sister is going to get married with her, because if the sister is going to get married to you, then obviously her father is meant to be aware of it, her wali is meant to be aware of it, and if her wali is going to be aware of it, then naturally he's going to want to know and meet the parents of the brother. If he's not going to do that, then that sounds very strange, and it's unlikely that something like that would actually even occur. If it does occur, then that's obviously indicating that there's something else happening which is not really going according to the Sharia. So maybe the sister is going to get married without the permission of her parents as well, which in that case the marriage will be completely invalid. Okay, so I would strongly advise against getting married in such circumstances. Please remember your family in this. Okay, remember your parents. They are more important to you than your spouses. Okay, it's a golden rule in life. You have to remember that. And in many cases, when you're young, your emotions and your hormones are running around everywhere, and you're very eager to get married, and at the same time, as a result of that, you can sometimes neglect the rights of your parents. You can neglect your family relations as a whole, and really you should be wary of that, and think ahead, and try not to become overwhelmed by your emotions and your feelings. Wallahu a'lam. Another question here: if you really want to get married but parents want you to study further, etc., how can we go about this? The key thing is that you're open with your parents and you try and make it clear to them what your intentions are. If you keep shying away from speaking about the topic, naturally your parents are going to assume that you're not that keen on getting married. It's a gradual process, and it's not going to happen overnight. So the earlier you start informing them that you want to get married, the better it will be. Okay, and as I said, communication is very, very important. So start early on. If you feel as though you want to get married now, let them know now. Even if you're at university, and it is possible to have a basic marriage done when you're at university. A lot of people have got married when they were at university, and they had, they were able to study well, and and fulfill the rights of their spouses, etc. Yeah, and it's possible. So, but the key thing is inform your parents early in advance. Yeah? And if you tell them right at the last moment, when you've found someone and you feel that attachment there, yeah, and then you tell your parents, that's the wrong way of going around it. It's a wrong way of going around it, because they're probably going to say no at first. And most people, to be honest, if the first time they mention marriage to their parents usually laugh it off and think, oh, you're still young, you still got XYZ to do and achieve. Okay, so start off now. Inform your parents of your intentions if you are keen to get married. If they say no, then you have to be patient and wait until the time will come, because as I said, it's usually a big shock to the system of the parents when they find out that their children want to get married. They're not used to the idea, especially when they look at their children, they look at them growing up very, very fast, and to them, your parents, you were a child only yesterday, and now you've become a grown adult. So it's difficult for your parents to accept that. So be patient. Keep advising them, keep informing them of your intentions to get married. Then inshallah, they will eventually come round, inshallah. Okay, if there is a sister in your lecture that you want to potentially ask about marriage, what is the best way to go about it? So we've mentioned already that it is permissible for you to ask directly. Okay, although it has to be done with the proper etiquette and adab, and with with haya, a sense of modesty and haya, the best thing to do is you can ask for her information of her wali, the details of her wali, and that should be made. Then that will be obvious what your intentions are to the sister. If you find it's difficult to do that, maybe you can ask another brother to ask her, or if you know her brother or other members of her family, approach them, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, in a university setting, what practical steps can a brother or sister take if they don't have a mahram, if they don't have maharim to help? As I said, it's not necessary that you have to. It's not necessary that someone else from your maharim has to approach her family or his family, depending on who asks this question. You can approach directly, okay, or use other people, even your friends, or other sisters you may know, or other brothers you may know, that might be able to, pass on the message to find out if they are looking to get married. If a brother is not financially settled, can this be a factor to reject a proposal? Absolutely. If the father is concerned for the well-being of his daughter and he sees that the brother is not financially stable, then he has every right to reject the proposal. Absolutely every single right. Because at the end of the day, he's her guardian for a reason, because he's concerned about her well-being, and if he thinks that you will not be able to take care of her financially and provide for her, then he can, without a shadow of a doubt, reject the proposal. What if a brother seems amazing to you in deen, however parents do not agree? As we mentioned already, for your wali to accept the proposal is an absolute must. If he rejects, even though you think he is amazing in your deen, you have to be patient, okay? And as we mentioned, if there are many other people that you can potentially look into. There is not just one person that will be amazing in your life. There could be potentially many other people that, many amazing brothers that could be potential spouses for you. If your parents keep refusing and they become an obstruction in your path to marriage, and they're very obstructive in the sense that your father completely rejects every single proposal, then you should take the matter to a qadi, a judge in a Sharia court, for example the Sharia Council, or an imam or a well-known scholar, so that he can sit down with your father and discuss why he keeps rejecting proposals. Then possibly we can look at appointing someone else as a wali. But as I mentioned, very, very importantly, changing the wali is a matter of qada, is a matter of judgment by a judge or a scholar, not a matter of fatwa where you just look online for a fatwa and apply it to your own circumstances. Every single case is unique and individual in its own right, and therefore has to be treated in that manner. Okay, another question here. How would you advise one who has many friends who are non-mahram and they are struggling to stop doing haram actions with each other? I believe we covered that already in the QA session. Some people are involved in boyfriend and girlfriend relations and they feel as though they love each other so much that they intend to one day get married with each other. What would you advise? This is a common misunderstanding, and this is even common even amongst practicing couple, brothers and sisters, where they'll become very close to one another, knowing that free mixing to that degree is haram, but they have in their minds that, well, they're going to eventually get married anyway, so it shouldn't really be a major issue. This is a trap from shaitan. Let us be clear about it. It's a trap from shaitan, because who said that they're going to get married eventually? We don't know that. Many obstacles can come in the way that could prevent them from getting married. So then what will happen? They would have ended up having that relationship which was clearly haram. Clearly haram. So a man and a woman only become halal for one another once they have actually conducted the actual marriage contract. Prior to that, they are complete strangers, ajnabiyya to one another, and they have to treat each other in such a manner. Okay, so really it's a trick from shaitan to think that, oh well, we're going to eventually get married, so it's okay for us to have some sort of relationship. No, this is completely haram. Okay, what makes your relationship halal is the marriage contract, not the intention to get married to one another. Okay, let me make that clear. So what makes your relationship halal with one another is the marriage contract, not your intention to get married to one another. Okay, in today's day and age, many people are able to secretly fulfill their desires. Pornography or actions of the limbs or zina, etc. can speak about the harms of these things and how one can protect oneself from such vices. This is a serious problem today due to the ease in which people can commit such acts of haram. The first thing one has to remember, when sin is so easily available to come across, one must really consciously try to protect themselves even more. So the first thing to do is realize that your ability to stay away from sin, it's really from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't just depend upon yourself, because shaitan can easily trick you and overwhelm you. So seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from these sins and from these vices. The Prophet ﷺ taught us a dua, that, oh Allah, I seek refuge from the evils of myself. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min sharri nafsi. Wa min sharri maniyyi, even subhanallah. He said, I seek refuge from the evil of my sexual fluids, literally. So, ask Allah to protect you from your desires, from your akhlaq, from your evil manners and behavior. And that's very, very important. Secondly, when the temptation of sin arises, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Consciously try and remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether that be remembering Allah upon the tongue, saying astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayk, or making tasbih of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or begin to recite the Quran. Because when the shaitan he sees a person remembering Allah and remembering Allah through Quran or through dhikr, he flees, and this is why he is called Al-Khannas. He comes and goes very, very quickly, because he goes when he hears the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, try and do some practical things that if you find that you fall into these sins very easily. So for example, if it's watching pornography, then in that situation, for example, if it's a computer, don't keep a computer in your room. Keep it in a public place in the house, like in the living room. Always keep it there, such that the temptation for sin would be less. Because if you put it in a place in your house where everyone sees, then it's unlikely that you'll access such haram. Okay, always keep yourself in righteous company, and when you're try and minimize the times that you are alone, other than acts of ibadah and worship. And if you find that you have a lot of free time, because usually free time and being alone usually leads on to these types of vices. So in situations like that, try and preoccupy yourself with your free time. Try and use your free time to do good acts, making sure that you don't have time where you're not doing anything good. So use your time wisely, and that will hopefully, inshallah, help in trying to stay away from such sin. If a person wants to get married and they have a lot of desires but they don't have the means, how can one protect themselves in society where we're encouraged to be sexually active? As a hadith mentioned, that we mentioned in the lecture, يا معشر الشباب من استطاع منكم الباء فليتزوج. O assembly of you, whoever is able to marry, then let him get married. فمن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإن له وجاء. Then whoever is not, then let him fast, for that indeed reduces one's desires. So fasting is a very important means to help reduce desires, and I think we spoke about this in the lesson, in the lecture, that at first it's a habitual thing. You have to get habitually used to fasting. You might find at first it doesn't help, but it gradually, you need to be consistent in doing it for it to gradually have an effect on you. And remember that fasting is not just staying away from eating and drinking. As the Prophet ﷺ said, رُبَّ صَائِمٍ حَظُّهُ مِنْ صَوْمِ الْجُوعِ وَالْعَطَشِ. How many people there are that the only thing they attain from their fasting is hunger and thirst. Fasting is beyond that. Fasting is a means by which you become closer to Allah, and that's how you should view it. That by you abstaining away from eating and drinking, you are using that as a means to become closer to Allah, where you realize your weakness and your need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you reach that stage of fasting, then you'll find that your urges for to fulfill your desires actually is reduced. And obviously try and keep your mind and thoughts focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the akhirah and bettering your deen, and then inshallah you will find that and obviously lowering the gaze is very important as well in this society where we're surrounded by sexuality. And so lowering the gaze and trying to consciously think about things that will benefit in your deen will also help you in this as well, inshallah. As a student, how can one know if they are able to display or observe patience with regards to marriage and protecting oneself? Well, it's not really a matter of knowing whether you are able to do it. The key thing is that you attempt to do it. You attempt to be patient, and you attempt to control yourself, and you try to protect yourself. That's the key thing, and that you seek help in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in achieving this, inshallah. Okay, again, what is the most halal way of meeting your partner? As we mentioned, we've answered that already, so there's no need to really go into more detail. How to get to know the other half before marriage, what is halal. So once you are keen on getting married, as we've mentioned, and you have the support of your family and they are aware of it, okay, the first thing to do is, the best way to do it, if you believe someone is a potential spouse, then meet them with the knowledge of your family in a sound environment, such as her mahram is present, whether it be her father or her brother, and it's done with their consent. Then you can sit down with them and meet them and discuss and ask questions that you feel are necessary and take it from there. The last thing to do, as we mentioned already, and we need to stress this, is you get to know a sister or a brother, and then you take the matter to your family. That's not the right way of doing it. As I said, you can develop a type of attachment which will become, and if your parents end up saying no, it could lead to a lot of fitna, a lot of harm, and a lot of hurt. So don't go down that line, inshallah. Okay, so that really answers the question. There's one question here about the ingredients of a happy and successful marriage. We'll probably leave that for another time, as I think most of the brothers and sisters are more concerned about getting married in the first place and then speaking about successful marriage, the ingredients of a successful marriage. So we'll leave it at that point, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanakallah wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.